What's up, guys? If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Also, please smash that like button on the video and enjoy the show. We did get a new presidential candidate in the last 7 days. Rather interesting how that went down. And by the way, we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about Kim Cheadle's testimony, which was hilarious at best and tragic at worst, that happened on Tuesday. And we are also going to be talking about El Mayo, who is the famous head of the Sinaloa cartel, who was seized by U.S. authorities against his will, it seems, earlier this week. And that there's a lot there. I have a lot to say on that. I've been talking to some people who know some things there, and that's interesting. So we'll get to that. But starting with Kamala, I guess everything's a step up from Joe Biden as a candidate. The guy literally couldn't talk. He was basically non-responsive in many ways, or unresponsive in many ways at this point. And I think it's fair to say he's at a point where he's probably not fit to be president. I mean, if you can't talk and can't function and, you can barely move, you probably shouldn't be the leader of the free world. That's a separate conversation. But he steps aside, and I found the narrative very interesting to see how quickly it shifted because, for the last 3 to 4 years, the approval rating on Kamala Harris as vice president has been at record lows. And to put that in perspective, Dick Cheney once occupied that office. And yet, out of nowhere, she's now like being pushed in the media as the golden girl. This is the same media that, as in April and May, were saying that she might be a drag on a Biden ticket as vice president. She's now, color of Rolling Stone. Oh my God, we love her. She's going to be president, yada, yada, yada. And all these polls are coming out that say that, suddenly she's like tied with Trump nationally, which I'm not sure I believe, because the chaos that the Democratic Party has created in this election, which they've done to themselves, no way, in my opinion, can that have people like on board, regardless of how much dislike there is for Trump. And obviously there is plenty of material there and plenty of people who are going to dislike him. And I understand that. But to me, there's something a little offensive in the DNC effectively taking control of the past 3 election cycles. And let's review that so that you can understand what I mean there. And by the way, thank you to everyone who's liking this video and subscribing to the channel. If it's your first time here, sharing this around with friends, I really appreciate it. This is something Alessi and some of my guys are pushing me to do more. So I will be doing more of these live streams. I don't know if it's good or not, but I appreciate all of you who are here in the comments. It's when I'm doing these, it's hard for me to look at this and, look over here and deal with it. So I do look at comments afterwards. When you comment on the video, I'll look through some of the chat as well, just to see what people are saying. But thank you for being here. Anyway, so in 2016, the DNC effectively put Hillary Clinton into the candidacy. We've seen that in various leaks from WikiLeaks. We've seen the fact that Bernie Sanders did tap into a real populist movement that year and was effectively stonewalled by the DNC. It's reasonable to say, not a guarantee, but reasonable to say that he should have been the nominee that year and probably would have had the votes to do it, but the DNC wanted none of that. So there's one. Then in 2020, the pandemic hits, everyone goes into the basement. And if you remember, there were a bunch of candidates there who, right when the pandemic was coming up, like as it was becoming a thing, suddenly all dropped out in unison and endorsed Joe Biden so that he could get over the top versus Bernie Sanders and make him the nominee, when in fact he was already showing signs of cognitive decline. I would say at the time he was not nearly the talker he used to be at that point, and was, I don't think, a strong candidate. If people would have wanted to argue 4 years before, or if he had run 8 or 12 years before that, if he would have been a better candidate, that's fine. But in 2020, he was not. So they put him in there, and then he won the election versus Trump. 2024, after 4 years of him declining even further and the economic problems persisting, some of the world wars, global wars that are breaking out under his watch, money from us going over there in repetition over and over again, people generally pissed off. You are now in a position where Trump, who did plenty to bury himself, has even become a victim in many ways. I mean, they tried to cancel the guy. Then they tried to put bullshit charges on him. Then he literally got shot 2 weeks ago, which is fucking crazy. Like, he's like the victim candidate now, who's also able to point to some things in his presidency that were at least normal compared to this past one. So now the DNC is scrambling because it's like, fuck, we're going to lose this election to Trump. And they pushed the old man out of there. I'm going to come back to that in a second too, with how that went down, and put in Kamala, who has never, I believe, and correct me in the comments if I'm wrong about this, has never won she has never had a national vote casted for her. When she ran, or cast for her, when she ran for the presidency in 2020 in the Democratic primaries, I believe she dropped out before Iowa. So she has only ever had voters cast a vote for her in the state of California. So you now have a woman who, yes, she was just vice president, but she is now she's the presumptive Democratic nominee without ever having a voter a part of the process, which just feels dirty. Now, if I was going to see it from their level, especially after Trump got shot and had one of the most badass moments in the history of the world afterwards, they were going to get blown out in this election with Joe Biden. That said, it's their fault for running him. So if you're going to go in and replace him, my thought from a Democratic standpoint is you need to at least have a real open convention. You know, it's not my fault you put the convention all the way in like mid-August or late August or something, very close to the election. That's not my problem. It's not the voters' problem. Like, people's voice should be heard in that. And Kamala, you know, they're doing as much as they can in the media to prop her up at this point, but she is, to say she's not a strong candidate, you know, again, Trump's his own conversation, but to say she's not a strong candidate would probably be underselling it. I mean, you're talking about a woman who, when she was Attorney General of California, was a horrible prosecutor. This is a woman who threw the single mothers of truant children in jail. She threw basic marijuana offenders in jail and laughed about it, whether it was just nervous laughter or was actually laughing. Either one's pretty cringy. She would suppress evidence on people who were sitting on death row who had proof that they didn't do the crime they were convicted of, which to me is like, like that's criminal on every level, doing that. So not a great track record there. And then as vice president, like I said earlier, she had very low approval ratings. I will give her the defense that, like, the vice presidency isn't exactly the most fun type of job. You're kind of the afterthought. That said, she was made the border czar during what ended up being the worst fucking 4 years in the history of the country for the border. And now, over the past week, you have people in the media who are trying to say that that's not true, which is ridiculous. Like, if you're going to call out the things Trump lies about, you need to call out the things that are lies about with her, if not for the fact that they're the ones lying about it in the media, which is the root of the problem. There was literally like a White House memorandum that said, I don't have it up right now, but someone can put the link in the comments. We have declared Vice President Kamala Harris the border czar. I mean, it doesn't, you know, pun intended, it doesn't get more black and white than that. You know, it's literally black and white on paper. So when I see shit like that, I'm like, all right, some of that feels like marketing. And it kind of begs the question to me, and it's the question I've had for the last 8-9 years. You know, people like to go at the bureaucracy and the quote unquote deep state and shit and ask the question of, you know, what's the catch with Trump? Like, why do they hate, like, people will try to say they hate him so much because he calls out all their bullshit, which might be true. And they might do a lot of things wrong, which I wouldn't argue with. But I've always felt like it's got to be something deeper than that. And I don't want to talk out of my ass because I don't fucking know. But I would love to be a fly on the wall in some of these back offices and just hear whatever the reasons are that, like, people within the government will do everything they can to control the narrative in the media against this guy at all costs, to the point, by the way, that it ends up having the opposite effect. Like, what is it about him, minus, the boisterous tweets and, maybe cutting certain funding to certain parts of the government and stuff like that, minus the basic shit? What is so serious that that's the case? Like, is he an alien? Do we have proof of that? And like, he's here from another planet to like simulate the destruction of, like, I want to know what it is, because they're obsessed. They're obsessed with the guy, like in all the weirdest ways. I mean, they have that term, Trump derangement syndrome. Like, the media, which is a very controlled asset across the board, left and right, but obviously has far more representation on the left than mainstream media. Like, they all have built-in Trump derangement syndrome. Like, what? It can't just be the tweets. It can't just be, the careless phrasing and stuff. Like, yeah, you can pick apart a lot of things Trump does. You can argue with all the things politically that he does. You may have different opinions on how he legislates. That's fine. But like, the personal, like, this is Satan, this is Hitler, I'd just love to know what the root of that is. I'd love to know what the root of whatever it was, 51 intelligence officials signing their name to a paper in October 2020 verifying that the Hunter Biden laptop was disinformation when these people knew it wasn't. Because, by the way, whether you like them or not, there are some people on that list who are like legendary, if you will, intelligence agents. And you may hate them because of what they did there, but like, sometimes I'm wondering what did they know? And then I'd love to judge if like that was enough to do it. The problem to do something like that. The problem is when you then don't share the truth with the public, you deserve every bit of the blame you get for quote unquote messing with the democratic process. And that goes across the board. That goes beyond the bureaucracy. That goes into the DNC, the RNC if they try to do stuff, which, side note, the RNC is like kind of funny. I always had the joke, like, the DNC's organized corruption, the RNC's unorganized stupidity. The RNC, like, Trump would have never happened if he ran as a Democrat. The DNC would have fucking put that shit down. He would have never happened. But the RNC didn't want it to happen and then didn't know how to stop it. Right? So any way you look at it, like, the intent in so many of these organizations is political power and corruption. Or maybe I shouldn't say intent. The end result of what they do ends up being that. And sometimes I'll bet the intent is that as well. But as it pertains to Trump, I just love to know what makes them prop up a vice president with like a fucking 30% approval rating, who is also, I mean, this is a little bit of a personal attack, but I don't mean it that way. I'm just stating it like it is. She's really cringy. Like, she's been in politics how long, and she hasn't worked with like a laughing coach or something? I mean, come on. Like, work with somebody. Some of the Trump ads I'm seeing that like end with her, let's call it what it is, like a cackle. It's so effective because like you hear that, you're like, I don't really know what that is, but I'm not sure what to make of some of those polls other than they're probably a little skewed. Can't prove that though. We're 100 days out from the election as of tonight. So it's going to be a very interesting 100 days. The fact that we are 15 days out from the leading Republican candidate almost being shot in the fucking face and killed, and that is like 12 news cycles ago, should tell you all you need to know about how much crazier this can and most likely will get. So buckle in. And also, by the way, like, is RFK like going to drop out? Like, side note, he's like kind of an afterthought at this point. I mean, I respect him for trying to run an independent campaign, but I don't really know what he's still doing there. It's not really a point to me on that. So thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.